Tonight on the DTD Podcast, we have Tweel. He just made this amazing documentary for HBO Max. It's called Heaven's Gate, and it's one of the craziest stories you will ever hear. So let's get right into it.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
How about no, you crazy Dutch bastard? What we've got here is failure to communicate.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
That's cute. I remember when I had my first beer.
Why so serious?
I am serious, and don't call me sir.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD Podcast. I've been waiting for this one for a while. I went onto Twitter. I saw this documentary. Back up. I saw this documentary, went on Twitter, looked for this guy. He answered right up. And we're here to talk about Heaven's Gate, the cult of cults. It is a brand new documentary that's only on HBO Max, and it is fantastic. It tells the story of Heaven's Gate. It's a cult that was started way back in the 70s. It ended in a mass suicide, and there's still floaters out there somewhere. So without further ado, let's welcome the director, Tweel. How are you, man?
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So Heaven's Gate, wow. I had heard of these guys before, but this documentary opened my eyes wide open to this. This is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. So let's talk about it a little bit. It was started in about 75 that Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles had got together. They got their names Doe and T from The Sound of Music because Bonnie really liked that musical. And so they started this cult, and it was kind of a transcendent religious group. So if you can talk a little bit about the cult right off the bat, please, by all means, explain it a little better than I can.
Sure. So when they first started, actually, they called the group was called Human Individual Metamorphosis, and it was a very there was a combination of the UFO aspect of things, but also a reinterpretation of the Book of Revelation in the Bible. So but one thing that really made it different than what it evolved to later was it was really emphasizing the individual part of that, human individual metamorphosis. So everybody had their own path that they had to go on that would purify their bodies, purify their souls, so that they could literally biologically and chemically change into an alien that would be then lifted up into outer space on a UFO. So T and Doe at that time, as they were called, I think in 75, they were called Bo and Peep still. They were trying to guide you with a very loose set of principles on how to do this process and change. But it was really like, we're going to show you these signposts, but you have to sort of do the work on your own, and everyone's going to figure it out sort of on their own time, own dime kind of thing. And so it was very much, it was pretty loose, and you just had to go out and travel around and, help try to recruit other people, and give up all of your humanly possessions, give up your kids, give up your, your money, your house, your everything, and just be like a transient, and that would help you attain the spiritual enlightenment. And so, I think it's, for me, one of the fascinating parts is like seeing how that rugged individualism then shifted and changed over the years.
And so with all the groups out there, because I want to talk tonight about Heaven's Gate, but there's a couple others out there of Jonestown and things like that, the Waco, some very famous cults that have been in the news and had their own crazy stories. What was it about this group that made you decide that's it? Because you're known for documentaries. You have Gleason, Out of Omaha, Print the Legend, Finders Keepers, Innocent Man. You're all over the place. And I would say that each of those documentaries are different from each other. So what was it about this group that said that's the ones that we got to do next?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I sort of pride myself and love taking on different kinds of stories and trying to find different genres. And but I will say that there's a little bit of a loose connection here in this project to Finders Keepers, because I think that in both instances there's like salacious, wacky, weird headlines, and my perspective is always to try to like find the human pathos behind what brought these people to the situation that created this insane headline, and like to me there's always going to be a good story that leads up to that, and I feel like for me as a storyteller, trying to get to the heart of like why people do what they do, and tell the story behind the story. So like that's what I'm into, and Finders Keepers is, for your listeners, like two guys battling over the custody of a human leg in North Carolina is pretty insane.
Yeah.
So
And they're pretty dead set on getting that leg. So
yeah. Oh yes. Take over many years, followed that story. So yeah, for Heaven's Gate, I mean, I remember this when it happened in 97. I was in high school, and I remember all the same things that most people do, like the Nikes and the purple shrouds and the weird haircuts. And so I just like was fascinated to learn more. And so how this came to be, just for a second, was I finished The Innocent Man. I'd worked with Ross Dinnerstein and the people over at Campfire Productions, and they were like, well, we just got the rights to this 10-part podcast and that Stitcher did, and we want you to listen to it and see if you're interested. And I listened to it, and I really loved it and thought that it was unique because you did get to hear a lot of the members talk and a lot of the former family members of former members speak. And it just was it was gut-wrenching, but unique to me.
So how many years are we talking about research into this and actually filming?
We were able to draft off the podcast and their research and really try to, compile what they had, and then take it and go a step further and dig for a matter of months before we started interviewing people. So we did research from like March of 2019 until July, and then we started shooting in July, and then we stopped shooting in when the pandemic hit, sort of March of 2020, and we've been editing ever since, and we're racing to get this show out before the end of the year.
And so is it hard to find these people? Because there's some pretty deep interviews. I mean, to some of the people that you guys talk to in this movie, is it hard to find these people? Is it easy? Are they kind of hesitant to talk? Or are they like, hey, this story needs to get out there and you need to hear this side of it?
No, super hesitant and very sensitive, because people have been telling their stories for a long time and taking advantage of them or portraying them in a light that they do not approve of, or it was hard to, even though the podcast had come before us and had contact with these people, it was still difficult. And getting someone to talk into a microphone is different than getting them to talk into a camera. There's like, there is a shift when you put the lens on someone. So there's a little more pressure, but and in doing so, in trying to assure people that I really wanted to like hear their full story, that was my approach in how I interviewed them too. So for like Sawyer and Frank, some of these former members, like I think I interviewed Sawyer for 7 straight hours, and it was the longest interview I've ever done in my life. But I wanted to make sure that he was able to get out all the things that he wanted to, and he, of course, we're going to have to edit it down and get it into a proper fit for the edit, but like for the show. But I wanted to allow him to say all the things that he wanted to say. And
I just want to make sure Sawyer is the one with the beard, right?
He is, yes.
And so let's talk about him for a minute, because there were some things that I thought about him during it. He seemed very connected to the group. He seemed very like he was still into, I guess, the idea of the group, not necessarily still doing what that group did, but very behind the idea of it, that transcendental kind of metamorphosis of him. What struck out to me, though, about him was that he would talk about these things, but then every opportunity that he had to do one of those things in the group, the castrations or whatever, he ended up not doing those things. So I really saw like a dichotomy with him where he seemed very much part of the group. And then when it came to really proving that he was part of the group, he never really did. Am I off on that? Or is that the feelings that you got from him too while interviewing him?
No, that's the feeling I got exactly. I think that you're hitting the nail on the head of this sort of dichotomy and this tension within Sawyer, that he very much wants to be following this group, but fights, like there's something in him that fights against it as well. And I think that that tension was something I recognized in the podcast even. It was just like, man, I really have to go talk to this guy, and I want to hear what he has to say, and I want to experience that myself because I can hear it. But I think for me, where I come down on Sawyer is I think that the like ethos of the group was to disconnect yourself from your humanness, to try to be able to become these next level sort of alien beings and get rid of all your anything that makes you human. And the problem for Sawyer, in my estimation, is that he's just an incredibly human person. He's incredibly vulnerable and genuine, and like he just can't help but be those things. And so it's pretty heartbreaking to watch that tension with him all the time.
And I think to take it to one more level with him is, I think that, I don't know if it's regret that you see in him at kind of towards the end of the documentary, or if it's a relief from him. Like, man, am I glad I didn't do that stuff. But then talking about it, I think he feels, I don't want to use the word coward or anything like that, but he feels like he should have done more to prove that he was part of the group. But you can also see that in his face, like, man, am I glad I didn't do that, because that was crazy. And
yeah,
and that's what I got from him, was that I think that you see within these groups, with him especially, that as much as you're into it, because he was around for a long time, there's just some things that people just can't go for. And it's amazing to me to see that they're so committed to this group, but it gets to something like, well, it's not a small thing, but castration and stuff. And he even talked about going ahead with it and doing it. And then of course he didn't do it, but I could see that not in a lot of the members in that documentary. A lot of those people were, they were dead set on what they were going to do.
Well, I mean, some of the sociologists talked about this, is like what cults and groups like this are really looking for is what they call true believers. People that will completely give themselves over to another, to a belief system and to another person, meaning to another person in a lot of different ways. But in Heaven's Gate parlance, that's like giving yourself and trusting only T and Doe. Like basically they have the sole access to the truth, and anything they say goes. And if their belief system shifts over the years and things, they say one thing one year and then the next thing they say something different, like
which
that's
happened
okay,
multiple times.
Which happens, yeah. And a true believer is someone who can rationalize that and still stay with the group.
So let's talk about T and Doe for a little bit. I want to go first into Doe, Marshall Applewhite. Now, he was a teacher at one point. Everyone said he was very charismatic, that he got along. He was fired for a supposed sexual relationship with one of his male students from the University of St. Thomas, Houston. And he seemed to kind of, even though there's no real interviews with him in the movie, he seems to really latch on to Bonnie Nettles. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of kind of I don't know if I'd say controversy on the internet, but he met her at a mental hospital where he was visiting a friend, but there's other people that say he was actually a patient there and that he came across her. Which camp do you go in for that? Because I felt from the documentary it was that he was a patient.
We heard both, and we sort of presented it as both. Like, 'cause I'd say half the people gave us one story and half the other. So we had to decide. And so we in the series we presented as like, this is the version that a friend of his heard secondhand, and then you have Doe giving his version, which like makes him look better, and so that's the one that he's promoting. You know what I mean? So a lot of the former members don't necessarily buy the idea that Doe, or they don't promote the idea that Doe was a mental patient himself in any way, but some of the other academics and other people that were not former members do say that. So, you know, it's like conflicting field data, and we tried to honor both versions as best we could.
And I know you might not want to answer it, but what camp do you go in with it? Which more do you believe in? Because the story for me is very hard to believe that he was visiting a friend at a mental hospital, but he met Bonnie Nettles in the delivery ward. I didn't.
Well, she was at the same hospital, you know,
just like, in separate sections, I guess.
Right. I mean, and I don't know what the layout of that hospital in Houston would be, whether it's like, you know, like the delivery wards on the third floor, and then, you know, the mental care is on the second floor. Yeah, I have no idea.
Well, you probably want to put the babies as far away from that as possible. But what's funny is that he meets her, and she kind of brings up the ideas for this extraterrestrials, and that she has like this kind of foretold path, and he really latches on to that. And it seemed strange to me that he's kind of painted by everyone that has talked about him in the media and stuff that he has these wacky ideas and he's this crazy person. But for the majority of it, until after T passes, he's following her. And even after she's gone, kind of in the afterlife, he's following what he thinks she would be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's something I didn't know before listening to the podcast. And so I was like, man, there was a co-leader for the first 10 years. That's wild. I had no idea. And it's a woman, which is very unusual. And, you know, her whole vibe was not to really say much or do much publicly, but she was the puppet master behind the scenes. And, you know, so we were looking like crazy to find any video of her talking, which there really isn't any. We found some audio tapes of them where she is talking. And so it's a little strange to hear this seemingly, you know, she got a little bit of a Texas drawl, and like hearing that accent, she's definitely can be stern at times, but like, I don't know, there's just like something that feels a little sweet about her sometimes as well. So she's a real enigma, Bonnie Lou Nettles T. She's I think really complicated and hard to figure out, like, how is this lady the engine that is running this group?
Well, and you know, and you mentioned that, and she is very much so an enigma. But when you talk to her daughter in the documentary, and her daughter talks a lot about that, she doesn't believe that she really wanted to be there that whole time, that she had kind of a change of heart. Now, what was interesting to me is that, you know, they told everyone, give up your family, stay away from them, don't write letters. Now, of course, there's the Christmas newsletter and stuff like that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But this entire time, she's telling all these followers, give your families up, don't write letters. She's writing letters to her daughter. And you can see over time in the letters, her kind of attitude and kind of focus shifts, but it never goes back to the group. And it's weird that she talks to her daughter and tells her all these things, but never takes the ideas back. Is that out of a loyalty to maybe Doe, or a loyalty to the group, or to maybe not look like a fraud? What was it? Because she definitely, from reading the stuff, she definitely was not feeling it the same as she was in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I have to rely on the people that we talk to. And so one of the people we talked to is Robert Balch, who was, you know, a sociologist who infiltrated the group in 1975 and spent months with them. And then he tracked them over the duration of their existence and would, you know, do exit interviews with people when they would leave. He would track them down. He knows a lot. And so he, in his opinion, it was just that the fact that it was hard for T to try to leave the group and it was a lot easier for her to, if she went back to her old life, she'd have to explain to her family and friends, what she did and why she would leave them, and it would just be too hard. So the path of least resistance in his mind was to actually stay. And she had, it reminds me of, like, you ever heard of the sunken cost theory?
Where you've got so much invested that there's
Yep.
no reason to put, you're going to lose it anyway. So,
Exactly.
well, and in speaking about her, so she develops brain cancer. She dies, and no one ever lets her family know. And she was at one point, she was very close. She was like an hour away from her family. I get a shift right here of where this is where the group starts taking a wrong turn. As she kind of takes away that matronly unit in the group, I think we see a shift with Doe where we start to see a real cult becoming, where it's follow me. And you can see it in the videos, when all the teaching videos that he has, when he starts out, he's just talking normal. And as it goes on and it progresses, his eyes get wider. There's a very much change in his demeanor and his face. And I believe, like I said, that this is where the shift happened. Do you believe, or was it later on when the shift came?
Yeah, no, I think that is absolutely the shift. I mean, there's one detail that I remember that Frank told me too, that I'll never forget, which was that, like, again, one of the lasting images that I had was that Doe in those final years with the really big eyes and looking crazy. And Frank was like, yeah, he was doing that on purpose, because what he told us was that he felt like with his eyes, the wider his eyes were, the more human he was. So he was trying to pretend. He almost was like, I'm an alien. I need to pretend to be human. And humans like big expressions, so I'll do those, which is just such a weird train of thought. But yeah, I mean, I think that really seeing this, having the sole focus be on him is, I mean, that's where most of these groups sort of go wrong. Like, it's our human ego. It's power corrupts, as they say, and that just gets proven over and over again. You keep placing this trust in this person and allowing them to do whatever they want, and they get sort of drunk on that.
Well,
happens to anybody.
And it talks about that his bedroom was even separate, and that he was kind of away from the group in general, unless he was walking around the house. And so let's talk about a couple of the crazy things that they did. Start out with a simple one. These membership drives. They would be in the middle of these membership drives, and you would see the room was full, and they would get about halfway through, and people would be like, nope, no thank you. And they're gone. They're gone out of the group, and they want nothing to do with it. And I think this is where you start to see the crazy things, because I felt like they got more and more desperate as those membership drives went on. The membership was kind of drooping down. Everywhere they went, people told them they were kind of crazy, and you see it in the one part where Lieutenant Uhura, I can't think of her name, Nichelle Nichols.
Yes.
Yeah, her brother is talking about how dare these people say what we're doing and stuff like that, and you start to see a desperation come from the group members, but no one's there, especially like Doe, to say, all right, everybody calm down. We'll fix this out. The whole time their membership had been going up and down, but it seemed as we got towards the end that it got more and more desperate, and they started saying, this is your last warning. You can come with us or you're going to perish, and all that kind of stuff. I'm just wondering, in all your research, where did that come from? Where did that desperation all of a sudden build from?
I think it was just things were compounding on top of each other. So you have a group who thinks that they're reinterpreting the Book of Revelation, and that there's going to be the sort of end times, and so they're sort of waiting for this signal to prophecy that, and so you have this mentality that the world is going to be ending, and then you have these little steps that happen along the way. and they see the Hail Bob comment. But I'll jump back. Before they even see the comment, they are doing these membership drives and being rejected by people both in person to their face and being made fun of, but also they are really talented. The group has a lot of really talented website designers and coders back in the early days of the internet. And so they try to get their message out there. They're made fun of there. It's sort of like their early stages of cyberbullying, people just telling them to screw off and like that they sound crazy. And so they feel like, where is our, rather than cope with the idea that their message could be off, they say, no, everyone else is off. We don't belong here anymore. And we are right. The select few have this truth and no one will listen to us. We should be looking for a way off the planet. So it just makes them more desperate to find any reason to try to exit.
Which, once again, is a crazy thing again, because they say, we're not supposed to be here. We're supposed to be on a different planet. Oh, by the way, do you want to come with us? Because we got room in the spaceship if you want to get, but we're the only ones that are right. And you mentioned the websites, they were getting bullied, but it was getting a mass amount of traffic to it. In the early days of the internet, a ton of people were going to it. Now, there's rumor that it's still around and that it's been kept up, that the website has been kept up by former members. And
to be fair, though, they only, I think, recruited one person into the group from the website in the total of their existence while they were still here.
Oh, wow.
Now, the website is still active, and 2 former members run it and keep it up, but it has not changed since March of 1997 and looks exactly the same.
And I guess that's just for, the thing that I took away from it the most was this was a group that was determined to not be forgotten, and they did everything possible to not be forgotten. And we've talked about Jonestown, which they'll never be forgotten what they did. Waco will not be forgotten. But another crazy thing that they did, and we're kind of stepping up the level here, is the castrations. Can we talk about that? Because when it got to this part in the documentary, I was like,
sure.
They try the first ones, they mess it up. Well, first off, let's say that they put it in a room with the sign of Mexico over it, so that if the authorities ever caught them, they could say they went to Mexico. That was where the train went off the tracks for me. And then they get in there, and they have this person who was a nurse that worked for a doctor that did stuff like this, but cut too deep, it started swelling, they cut the testicles off, they take this guy to the hospital, they throw him in the bay. I mean, and then everyone in the room is like, wow, this might not have been a great idea. Let's hold off on it until we can find someone. First off, where did they come up with this? I know it was to hide, or not necessarily hide, but mask their sexuality and stuff like that. Did you find anything out of like the mind state of these people that agreed? Because I think it was a total of 9 people did it, right?
Yeah, 9 of the guys did it eventually over the course of like a year. But yeah, it was, that was another part of the story that I had forgotten about, I guess. And
I didn't even know about it.
Yeah. And so, it's a pretty wicked and reveal in the 3rd episode when we get into that it's just like, wait, they're doing what now? But that's how deep into it they were. Some of the experts that we talked to, who had been studying the group for many, many years, talked about the castrations in the framing of like, they heard that it wasn't even Doe's idea initially, that it was some of the other group members that are like, oh, we believe in this and we believe in you and your philosophy so much, we're going to take it to the next step. And like, what do you think about castration? Which I think is really an interesting situation, because here's Marshall Applewhite. He started this group, and it's almost like it's a box of his own, a nightmarish box of his own design that sort of is taking over his own life as well. And so he feels like, he has to go along with it or explain it or do, go with the group, even though they're going beyond his original intentions. Like one of the influences for me in putting this show together was a lot of the writings of Lawrence Wright, fellow Texan, who he wrote The Looming Tower, and he wrote Going Clear, the Scientology book. And for me, I really love this idea of like the people that started Al-Qaeda, the people that started Scientology, they started with somewhat benign beliefs, and then as things as the leaders started to take more and more control, they had to explain some of these things that were unexplainable. Like creating a religion is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
And so there's always going to be these deep questions that you have to come up with answers for. And so yeah, I just remember in Going Clear in particular, like you see L. Ron Hubbard having to explain oh, where did our souls come from? Outer space, Xenu.
And then a volcano
like,
erupted, and 100 million people
yeah,
on each ship came. Yeah, it's bananas. But you wonder, and that's where my questions really come. And what stuck out so much to me about this was, you have these sociologists in the movie, and they talk about it, and they say a lot of people walk away from this, and they go, "Those people must be stupid or whatever." These were smart people, and you think as a normal human being, how can you hear this stuff and go, "Yeah, that sounds about right"? I mean, the stuff that they were saying is absolutely insane. And it's bad to point it out that way, because I think you're right. This group started with, shall we say, a good intention, but it got to a level where you're like, yeah, we're all going to get on this spaceship, and we're going to transform, and we're going to turn into something else. And you
can't have any private thoughts, and you have people have a check partner who's monitoring your every move 24 hours a day. Yeah, I mean, it gets way more strict and intense.
And you look at it and you think, how do these people do it? And the only thing I can come up with is they want to be a part of something bigger than them, and they just want to be part of a group. Which, if you look at some of these people, they had families, they had people that loved them, and they completely stepped away from it.
But that's why it's so dangerous, because as humans, that's what we all want. We all want community. We all want to fit in. We all want, we all want to be connected to other humans. And so that's the core inside all of us that these groups are preying upon. And so, if you find a group of people or a message that makes you feel connected or safe, that they already got their hooks in.
And you're probably not going to back away from it, because another interesting thing about this to me was that you would see that people would leave the group, and they would be gone for a while, and then they would come back into the group, and then they would leave the fold again, and then come back into the group. Is it because they're exploring something else? Is it because I didn't see that it went into a lot of detail about that in the documentary. It said that they went out and came back and went out and came back. But was it because they were exploring something else, they believed something else, and then just couldn't find something better, or what was it?
I think that being inside the group was really hard. I think it was, you're sort of living in these big houses crammed in with a bunch of people. You're moving all the time. They never stayed in any one place more than 6 months, because for various reasons. But one of them, I remember that one of the members said that they're just trying to stay ahead of IRS. They can never pay taxes in one place and have an address to track and social security numbers, and so they're always just traveling, and to go from place to place and be sometimes panhandling for money, but also or working jobs, or is a hard existence. So I think that one family member, or Kelly Cook's family, her parents, they were in and out several times over the years. They would stay in for 5 years, come out, reconnect with her, sort of foster that relationship a little bit, and then after a year go back for another 5 years, which was incredibly emotionally traumatizing for her. But yeah, they, both T and Doe, and then eventually Doe's mantra was like, if you don't want to be here, we don't want you here. So people could come and go. Now you have to buttress that against the fact that also they're being somewhat manipulated to stay.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, you can come and go, but also there's a ton of peer pressure and sort of like mental gymnastics in order to get people to try to stay and devote themselves.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about that. At one point, there is like Christmas newsletters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The leadership, if we'll call it that, is a little worried that if this goes out, families are going to come there and try and get their family members back. There's going to be a lot of disruption to the group. So they make the decision that, hey, go home and see your families, go do this and go do that. Some people go out, and I think only one person didn't come back, right?
Yeah. Correct.
It's just insane to me. Again, they let them go. They see how the real world is, and they go, you know what? I'm headed back. Got to catch the spaceship.
Yeah. There is there's a phenomenon, especially in the late 70s, where there's like cult deprogrammers and people that would, private investigators, like families would hire these people to go track their family members down that were in these groups, because a lot of cults were very prevalent in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the family members would hire somebody and get their family members back by like having them kidnapped out of the group. And they would bring them back to their hometown or back to their houses and, go through days or weeks or months of sort of like deprogramming protocols. And it gets into a very weird gray area about free will. And so that's what T and Doe were worried about, was like that age in particular of the late 70s of people being snatched out of cults, and they were like, don't want to lose their members who they rely upon. And so, yeah, I mean, they sort of felt like, well, we will let people go back and see their families, and then we'll get some of the heat off of us. But you had at that point probably 40 members who, it's not a ton of people, but it's 40 people, and they thought T and Doe were the second coming for the most part.
Literally.
Like, that's who they were devoted to, and no one was really going to change their mind.
But you talk about free will, and my question that I pose to you is, do you ever really think they had free will in this group? I don't think they did. From the second they step in, they don't have free will. There is very much a fictionary free will out there. Oh yeah, you can go see, but you don't want to do this, and you better take your check partner and all that kind of stuff. So was there ever really any free will in this group?
I mean, yeah, it's very hard. It's like mostly no, but here's the caveat.
Okay.
In my opinion, they asked to be brainwashed. So like they are actively saying like, I don't like who I am. I want you to make me somebody else. And that other person will be completely devoted to you. So like one of the sociologists likened it to the Marines to me. He's like, going into the Marines is it changes your mindset about the world and your perspective. And like people sign up for the Marines, you're not drafted.
Right.
And you're going in with your eyes open about how you're most likely going to be changed and put in danger and all these things. So like, this was another version of that, which I think, yeah, these are like pretty big questions that are hard to nail down, right? Of like,
absolutely,
how much free will do we all have?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to see, because you would say, I mean, I think you would agree, you have a different perspective than a lot of people in this group. This is a lot of research and talking to a lot of people. So I think you have a lot more insight than the average person to see what it was really like going on inside their heads. I mean, because you talk to them. So I want to mention a couple of other things that they start getting a lot more isolated. I feel that they got more isolated. They talk about the neighbors waving to them. They won't even say hi to the neighbors when they're in the final house. The only time they go out is with each other. They always have their check partners. And I think this is once again where Doe is really tightening down on the group and really inflicting. I would almost say now he's inflicting his will. This is no more a, hey, teach us the way. This is the way. There's no way around it.
Right.
And so did you, in all of the research, did you see anybody that was really started to take a second guess at it and like, man, I just don't know. And what were the reasons that they came up with where they said like, man, I just, this is not for me.
Yeah, there's a few examples. I mean, some people certainly left. A couple of people, I think, left around the time of the castrations. There was
when I
one
would head out the door.
for sure. But before the castrations, the idea of the just before, I think, was the first very subtle mention of losing your, as they would say, losing your vehicles or committing suicide in order to make it to the next level.
Okay.
And that lost a couple people. I don't know if you remember a guy in the series named Dick Jocelyn. He was one of the first members in 1975. And so he had always promised himself that, like, I'm never going to kill myself for any cause. And so even though he was about 18 years deep into this group and he had never left,
Right.
as far as I know.
But he wasn't castrated either, right?
He was not. So when that came up in like 1992 was like the first time that the mention of it, but not in an overt way, not a like, would you kill yourself for us? But it was like a, hey, what would, it was, I don't know the exact wording, but it was done in a more subtle way. And Dick saw through the talking points there and was like, this isn't for me anymore. Just like had a hard line in the sand in his mind and would not cross it. So yeah, there's, I think very few, again, this wasn't like a giant mass of people. It was a fairly small group, but there were certain things that turned people off over the years, which caused their numbers to dwindle by the late 90s. But I totally agree with you. By the time it got to the early 90s, by the time it got to the early 90s, the group was basically just a reflection of like Doe and his flaws and his ego.
So let's talk about, as we're getting towards the end of it, they start doing exit statements, making exit videos and stuff like this. So these guys are like completely committed. Now there's a couple things that I want to point out that I thought were super creepy in your documentary.
Okay.
The first thing that was super creepy was that song that they sang, where they have the whole group in the house. I think it's like a Christmas pageant or something that they're having in the house.
It's a talent show. Yeah.
But that's what I knew. All right, we're full blown bananas now. This group is gone. The song was super creepy. Then you talk about the exit statements, and you actually start showing the exit statements and these exit videos. And these people are like, this is just another day. Hey, we're out of here. Yeah. A lot of ties to Star Trek, which I'm sure they probably didn't like. And, because her brother was there. And that was one of the shows of the different Star Treks that they could use. But I think, in my personal opinion, the reason he let them watch Star Trek, and I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan or anything like that, but the whole point of Star Trek is to get to another level, to travel, see all these different things, and to be at a different place. And I think that really subliminally hammered his point home. Like, hey,
for sure.
Look how great it is, man. These guys are flying around the universe. They're having a good time. And I'm
not a Star Trek fan, but I do think that there was an even stronger parallel where, like, isn't there a rule in Star Trek where they're like sort of non-interference, like they're not supposed to.
Very much so. But another,
and that's what he was promising. Was like the next level. We're going to go up there, and we will be these we'll be in heaven in the next level, and we're going to go see other galaxies and start other civilizations, but like we're not going to interfere with them. We're just going to be doing basically exactly what's happening in Star Trek.
Well, and I think an even bigger tie-in is the Borg in Star Trek. The assimilation, that you cannot resist the assimilation. And I really think all these things really, I mean, he was a master manipulator. These things, these little subtle things really hammered his point home without him having to look like he was hammering his point home, which is super interesting. So anyway, we'll get back to the exit statement. So they start making all these exit statements. Everyone seems happy. Some people are doing it by themselves. Some people are doing it with their check partners. All these things. I don't remember. I don't know that he made an exit statement, did he?
He did. We actually start the whole series with
what
is essentially his exit. That's his, where he's up there and there's sort of reflected mirroring of the chair, the empty chair that represents T. That's his exit statement. And then the next day, all of the students, all the class does theirs. And it's about 2.5 hours long, and they're all on YouTube. And it's wild to watch. It is, again, it's like, it's really heartbreaking and eerie.
Because I don't know if these people really grasp by watching the exit, because you can watch them all on YouTube. I don't think they really grasped what was getting ready to happen. I think they were so far gone in the brain, now being brainwashed and stuff, that I don't think they really understood the levity of what was getting ready to happen. Did you get the same feeling in talking to people?
I mean, the sociologists that we talked to basically said, like, there was what they amounted to a little bit of a sense of relief that they had been following this mythology and this person for so long. A lot of them, most of them who ended up committing suicide, most of the 39 were people that had been there since 1975 or 76. There's only a very few who joined in 92, 94. So, like, this is a long time to be following people. Absolutely. And traveling around like I said, it was a grind to be part of the group. So I think that they were seeing this as a way to be like, well, if this is it, this is it. And at least this grind will be over. So it's that's part of it. The amount of brainwashing versus the amount of like agency that they're having over knowing what exactly is coming is really hard to tell. Like, you can watch the whole exit videos and it is like, you feel like you catch moments of people slipping in and out of both of those feelings.
Well, and when they talk about certain people, you see almost a mimicking. When they start talking about certain people, they mimic their characteristics when they're talking about that person. And mostly I'm talking about when they talk about tea and stuff in them, that they kind of start mimicking that feeling. And it brings me back to the point of that motherly figure that's in the group, that kind of quiet, kind of knows everything that's going on, and just a completely different role than Doe took in the group. Doe started out being a father figure, but ended up just being a leader of a group. That's it. And I don't think that his followers understood that at the end. Now, when you talk to some of the family members and stuff like that, I think it was T's daughter that said someone had called her and said that, hey, this group killed himself, and she knew exactly who it was. She knew that was coming. But to take
she heard someone say Father Doe, and she was like, "Oh, that's them."
Right.
And like a lot of the former members immediately knew what had happened when they just heard the initial news reports. Most of the initial news reports were off base factually, and talking that they were all men or all women, and I think it said they were all men. Yeah, it was really
because of the haircuts, right? That they had thought
Yeah.
when they went in there. Now I want to talk about that for a second. So they had planned this stuff out, and this is what I mean by they did not want to be forgotten. They planned this out very, very well. They had sent out letters and stuff and let people know, hey, you're going to come over here at this time. And one of the prior members even came in before the sheriff's department and filmed the entire inside. Whatever happened with all that? Did they take the film? Whatever happened? Because I thought, wow, that is insane that he's walking around filming this entire thing I think it's before he even called anybody.
Correct. Yeah. So he got a guy named Rio D'Angelo who was with the group for a couple of years. And he left like a month before the suicides. He left the group. And so Doe sent him a letter and said, come down, come to the house. He knew exactly where it was. He was staying there just recently. And he went in and filmed. And I think Doe wanted him to film to make sure that like the message of like how they had arranged themselves, like they had planned it so well that they didn't want the media and the narrative to be skewed after they were gone. And so yeah, Rio went in, filmed it. It's bone chilling to see some of this video of him walking around. It's quiet and you're just, there's rooms and bunk beds filled with bodies. And so he filmed, I think that the video is a few minutes long. And then Rio was a bit of struck a chord in the media. It's a very unique story. And but I think he was even further traumatized. Like we didn't get to talk to Rio. I think he's pretty much dropped out of the public eye for now. And I don't blame him. Like he got put through the ringer a little bit back in '97, and so he's done very limited press ever since then.
Another point that I want to bring up about these suicides is we've talked this entire conversation about people going and coming back to the group and stuff. You had some people, and I had no idea about this, you had some people that felt so bad that they weren't a part of the group's mass suicide that they ended up killing themselves after the fact.
Yeah. Again, I didn't know that either until doing this project. But yeah, there's actually everyone knows that the 39, but actually there was 3 other people, so there's 42 people that lost their lives for this cause. Yeah, it's a couple of them happened about a month after the suicides in March of '97, and then another guy was about a year later, February of '98.
And I think that was the part that stuck out to me the most, was because you look at these guys that did the original 39 and you think, wow, that was crazy that they even allowed that to happen. And they had all these, like you said, they planned it out so well. They had kill teams and second level and third level and all that kind of stuff.
They did it in shifts. Yeah.
Right. But then you look and you say, okay, I kind of get what they did. I kind of understand that. But then you look at these people that left the group because obviously something told them you need to step away, but then had so much remorse when it was over that they finished out the job to catch back up to him, because that was the whole point, was to catch. They were just going to be latecomers to the ship. That's the part that really stuck out to me, that how deeply this was embedded into their psyche in order to prove themselves to people that weren't even there anymore. Because no one knows they did that. That original 39, they have no idea that those guys even did that.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, that's it. It is. It shows the power of like these whatever story that connects to you, that you are a believer in. Like it really shows the power of it. Like even after the main group goes, the group that you are so connected to, you're gonna find a way, no matter how desperate, to try to join them. Like. I don't know how to explain it either. It's really rough.
So let me ask you, as we're wrapping this up, what do you think the saddest or the most jarring story to you was in doing all of the research and everybody that you talked to? What was the one that kind of set you back for a second? You were like, wow, that really happened?
Well, I mean, man, the castrations. It's a hard thing to, because I had sort of forgotten about them, and then I really did not. Sawyer was the second interview that we did, and the whole process of making the series, and like, hour 5 into our interview, all of a sudden we're breaking down like the blow by blow of like how people got castrated, and I just was like, holy shit, I forgot that this happened. And hearing the details of it, like you said, like the Mexico and the like, it took me aback. And like, I remember we finished that portion of the interview and we both were like, let's take a time out. We'll like take a break. We'll come back here in a minute. Because yeah, it's like stomach churning. I'm trying to think if there's any other.
It definitely wakes you up. If you're 5 hours into an interview, it's definitely going to wake you up when they start talking about it.
Right. It was like 9:00 at night. And we were like, oh my God.
That is, like I said, the castrations and the people afterwards were the two biggest things that stuck out to me. So while we're wrapping this up, okay, go ahead.
I'll say one other small anecdote is that there was we found this footage that no one had ever seen before from Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the mid to late 75 and early 76. And so there were some people that we found in there that ended up in the 39 who killed themselves. And so that was pretty wild to me. Like, deep in the process of making this, we got that footage like just a couple months before we wrapped up. And so like seeing these people that I had seen, I'd watched their exit interviews, I'd watched all this stuff and footage of them in the 90s. And here, one woman in particular, Joyce Scala, seeing her 2 weeks after she had joined, and she's talking about leaving her family, and like, I don't know, that just hit me hard, because I was like, oh my gosh, I know this person only through sort of one lens, and then here they are right when they joined. And it was like, knowing that woman is going to stay in for 22 years was crazy to me.
And so if I could ask about, how did you find that lost footage?
So yeah, just one of those, the documentary gods smiling on you. So one of our editors, James Lesh, he was reading a letter that Frank's cousin had written to his father, and in the letter he's like, oh, I wish you guys were here in Oklahoma with us, because some guys did some filming, and it really, like, the taping really showed what our message is in a really great way. And so James was like, wait a minute, let me just look up this guy who he mentions in this letter. And he looks up his name, finds out that the guy still has a video production company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, calls it up. His son answers. The son's like, well, my dad passed away a few years ago, but like, yeah, we have these old tapes, like 3/4 inch tapes of this group and it's just sitting in storage, and no one has ever contacted him. It's like this, just following the little thread of like reading the archive we got of like a letter led to this footage in a warehouse in Oklahoma.
Absolutely insane. So, you know what? Let's take a look at the trailer real quick, and we'll wrap this up.
Cool.
Now, the end of the age, I'm afraid I feel, is right upon us.
This is the biggest cult story in the country.
This was a voluntary situation. They may or may not have been influenced, but we'll never know that. But at this point, this is considered a mass suicide investigation.
Tiendo gave us the tools to brainwash ourselves. Literally wash out our humanness from our brain.
The basic idea of Heaven's Gate was that you would chemically and biologically transform your body, becoming a next level alien, and then you would physically get on board the UFO, which would sail off into heaven.
It says Heaven's Gate away team.
39 to beam up.
Are you filming this? No.
Everybody wants to think, oh, those are those crazy people. I would never do that.
Do I look brainwashed? Yeah.
Not so fast. They were well educated, often from very good families.
Me, a 10-year-old, I didn't believe that. And I would never, ever speak to them again.
I am well and safe as of now. That was code.
When you coming home? Oh, never.
T and Doe were paranoid and constantly on the move. And the FBI said there's really not much we can do about this group.
Doe said, we're going to proceed doing the castration. Who's going to go first?
Do exactly as I say, and you will not know death.
By killing themselves, they ensured their immortality.
They signed out hasta la vista, baby.
People say, who do you think you are? Is this a cult if I ever heard one? Yes, it is. It's a cult. I mean, it's the cult of cults. We'll see you in our next session.
It's a very short time before our departure.
Clay, I'm telling you, man, you knocked it out of the park with this one. Absolutely
so
a
much.
Fantastic documentary.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for the deep dive conversation.
Yeah. So anything that you want to promote real quick before we get out of here?
No, man, just go to HBO Max, check out the show, and excited to have people watch it.
Yeah, guys, that's going to be it for the show tonight. Definitely go check this out. Heaven's Gate, it's on HBO Max. That's the only place you can find it. It is a fantastic documentary. If you want more of us, go to Twitter at DoubleSpeakDJ, Facebook at the DTD Podcast, or at YouTube at the DTD Podcast. That's going to be it for tonight, guys. Go check out this film for sure. That's Clay. I'm DJ. That's been the show. We'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.